Oh, am I supposed to move this down? Okay, I'm just going to leave it here. So I'm Ellen, and I'm a documentary filmmaker. I make short character documentaries about people that I find interesting. And I make shorts because no one's funded me to make a feature yet. And there's something about the short form which I find interesting. You know, it has obvious limitations, so you have to respond kind of creatively to that and experimentally. I graduated from an MA in documentary filmmaking back in 2016, and I've been working on my own documentaries and other people's ever since. So I'm going to stop rambling, and I'm going to show you the film, which is why I'm here today. If I can make the slide work.
My eyes are always on the job. My mind never shuts off. You know, I'm sitting in the doctor's surgery and he's getting ready to do an injection or whatever, and I'm looking around going, could I make that in miniature? My mum does the food mainly. The business started off at her house. Very quickly it got too big for the kitchen table, so we ended up building an extension.
Usually start off with the actual thing that you're making in front of you to get the colour out and the shape. For instance, when I did tripe, I can't stamp tripe myself. The thought of it, but I went to the butcher's and got a piece and put it in a polythene bag on the desk to get the colour out and the texture.
People assume that the man of the house will have made all this stuff. And they say, oh, so does your husband make all this? And I say, no, me and my mum make it all. Do you? Oh. Usually a bloke that said it. When I was at school, my teacher described my work as clinical. All the straight A's and everything sort of led to university. But the friends that I had were coming back, they just ended up with a big bill. And it didn't necessarily lead to a job. And I thought, well, I've got a job here. I like doing it. I might as well. I get my inspiration from around me. We do a hairdressing range because I got a part-time job sweeping up and doing the shampoo, you know, a shampoo girl. It's creating a world. Some people create replicas of things. Some people create things that they could never afford in reality. This is me condom in packet. Originally ordered by a lady as a joke for her son-in-law. Wasn't given the details. It can be a bitchy world, can the miniatures world. People can be like, oh, I do that, and now she started doing it. And they've copied my idea or whatever, but we're all copying real life. The period stuff that other people make, it sort of feels like looking at a museum to me. It doesn't do anything for me. Why are we still doing miniatures of Georgian houses, Victorian houses, Tudor houses? We don't live like Victorians. The palaces were originally made for people in palaces, and the people who can afford them are still living in palaces, let's face it. I want to make my items for ordinary people. I like to represent now, the era I live in. If we don't do miniatures of what we do now, how will it be represented in the future? I'd like people to come across my things and think, that's what Kath Holden made, that's what she did of her time, you know, and of what she saw.
Great, I'm glad you all enjoyed it. So I need to apologise about how terrible my slide presentation is. I got really nervous about doing anything sort of graphicsy in front of a room full of creatives. So this is my keynote, and I'm afraid you're all going to have to look at this picture of Kath for the next sort of 5 minutes. So I made the film because I was on this short film scheme that's run by the Indie Training Fund, and you get 6 weeks and £5,000 to make a short film, a 3-minute film for the Sheffield Documentary Festival. And basically, and that was actually the director's cut, so that's 4 minutes, but the original was 3. And because I had this really constrained brief, I thought I'd make a short film about small things. And, you know, that's basically where I got the idea from. So when I first started researching the world of miniatures, I was looking at stories of women who had built dolls' houses, which were like exact replicas of homes that they'd lived in or houses they'd grown up in. I also sort of looked at people that had built like an entire fictional storylines around their dolls' houses. So, you know, like they had sort of family histories and dramas for the sort of imagined inhabitants and all this kind of thing. But none of these people were quite right. And by this, what I mean is that to find someone interesting for a film, what you're looking for is character. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they've done like the most spectacular or strange thing. It's just that they're able to kind of tell you why they do what they do. You know, like another distinction I could draw is between a hobbyist and an obsessive. So I think I spoke to a lot of hobbyists, but Kath's an obsessive, and I think that's kind of what made her stand out to me. So I found Kath because I drew up this like huge database of everybody that worked in the world of miniatures. It was a mixture of people that I found on Google, and then I also just like contacted lots of people that build dolls' houses and asked them, you know, like, who makes your tiny fruit bowls and like who makes your tiny chairs and all this kind of thing, and tell me their phone numbers and I'm going to talk to them. And I talked to so many people before I met Kath. And you know, she just like stood out to me straight away because not only does she have an incredibly deadpan sense of humour, as you can tell from the film, but she's really open and she's really honest about like why she does what she does. You know, if you come back to this idea of character being about somebody being able to express their motivation to you, then like Kath was definitely able to do that for me. You know, she kind of sees herself on this social project. Like, you know, if she personally doesn't document the world as it is now, then it's going to be lost in the sands of time or whatever. But, you know, also more seriously, it's that she's kind of chronicling her own experience of the world and what she's seen. And to me, that kind of like raised all these questions about art and like why we make art and posterity and all these kind of like lofty themes, which I know are really lofty, but I kind of hope are in the film somewhere. So, yeah, like how did we make this little film? It was actually shot over 2 days, so it was just like I went down to Bradford, which is where her and her mum live. And it's just me and the DP, and we just basically shot it in her mum's house. And then we did another day of filming at the Kensington Dolls House Fair. So I knew already that like we needed to include a wider sense of the miniatures world. But also, by this point, I'd already actually done the audio interview. So it's not that I have, you know, I don't script things. And I never asked my contributors to kind of like deliver lines, but from an audio interview, I kind of like build the narrative so that when I got to the Dolls House Fair, I kind of had a good idea of what it was that I wanted to film and that kind of thing. So yeah, it was, you know, it wasn't a particularly hard film to make, and I wasn't sure how to end this little speech, but I thought I'd end with some thoughts on like the meaning of miniatures. Because I think miniatures are like a weird gift for a filmmaker. You know, they're sort of storytelling devices in themselves. And I think that's why you get so many films with miniatures in them. You know, like when I tell people about this film, they haven't seen it, they often talk about Hereditary, which is a little bit unsettling and a bit unfair on Kath as well. But as Kath says in the film, miniatures are basically a way of people representing a world. So either one that they can't afford in reality, or the world that they themselves have experienced. And it wasn't that I wanted to make a film about the craft of making miniatures, but it's I just wanted to try and tell the story of someone's life through these little objects. And as someone that makes character portraits, that's basically kind of what is important to me, to be able to tell the story of someone's life. And not the details of what they do, but why they do it. And on that note, I'm going to stop talking about the details of what I do and allow us to move on to Olivia.